Amanda Sullivan was feeding her rescue dogs on her Oregon farm when the sheriff's cruiser pulled into her driveway, bringing news that would shatter her quiet existence. Her estranged son Ryan had been listed as the biological father of a 5-year-old girl who had just lost both parents in a horrific crash on Highway 40, leaving the child traumatized into silence. 3 months later, as 14 German shepherds formed a protective semicircle around the small, silent girl on Amanda's porch. The child raised her hands, and what happened next made the hardened sheriff drop his coffee mug in disbelief. 14 powerful canine throats released a synchronized chorus that sounded almost like music, commanded by the tiny hands of a girl who hadn't made a sound since watching her parents die. Riverbrook, Oregon sat nestled between ancient forests and rolling hills, a farming community where neighbors still knew each other's business and newcomers were noticed. 3 months after the devastating flood that had nearly wiped the town off the map, blue tarps still dotted rooftops, and the scars of rushing water remained etched into the landscape. The town was resilient, though, just like its most reclusive resident. Amanda Sullivan's farmhouse stood on a slight rise a mile from town, weathered but sturdy like the woman herself. At 65, Amanda carried herself with military precision, her silver hair cut in a practical bob, her movements efficient from decades of discipline. 22 years training military working dogs had left her with an impressive skill set and invisible scars. The incident in Afghanistan that had abruptly ended her career, 3 handlers injured during a training exercise gone wrong, remained a shadow that followed her, deepening after her husband James died of cancer 5 years after his own return from combat. The isolation that followed had been both punishment and refuge. Most folks in town knew to leave her alone, respecting the invisible boundary she'd drawn around herself after her only son Ryan had walked away 8 years ago following an argument that had left wounds too deep for either to acknowledge. Emma Harper was physically unharmed by the accident that had claimed her parents' lives, but the trauma had stolen her voice. Born deaf, she had once communicated fluently through sign language, her expressive face and nimble fingers painting words in the air. Now, at 5 years old, she moved through the world like a ghost, her hazel eyes vacant, her small body rigid with tension. Jessica Harper, 58, and weathered by a lifetime of making ends meet, had done her best for her great niece. Between double shifts at the diner and mounting medical bills, the arthritis in her hands growing worse with each passing day. She'd reached the end of her rope. Sheriff Tom Mitchell had known Amanda since high school, had served alongside her husband, and understood trauma better than most. When complaints about 14 German shepherds gathered at Amanda's property began coming in, he'd approached with caution rather than citations. And then there was Alpha Magnificent, scarred and watchful. The shepherd moved like a soldier, his amber eyes missing nothing, the healed scar across his muzzle telling a story of survival. The military tags around his neck connected him to a past Amanda was only beginning to understand. Martha Thompson's ancient Chevy pickup rattled down Amanda's gravel driveway on a Tuesday morning in early April. The dogs announced the visitor with a chorus of barks that brought Amanda to the porch, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. She hadn't been expecting company, especially not Martha, whom she knew only as the sister of her former neighbor. "Amanda," Martha called, climbing stiffly from the truck. "I know this is unexpected." She glanced nervously at the German shepherds watching from various positions around the yard. Alpha stood closest to Amanda, his posture alert but controlled. "Been a while?" "Martha," Amanda replied, her voice carrying the slight raspiness of someone who spoke more to animals than people these days. "What brings you all the way out here?" Martha hesitated, then opened the passenger door of her truck. A small figure sat motionless inside, staring straight ahead. "This is Emma, my niece's little girl." Martha's voice cracked. "There was an accident 3 months ago, Highway 40 just outside Riverbrook. Sarah and David didn't make it." Amanda's expression softened. She'd heard about the pileup: 6 vehicles, black ice, and 4 fatalities. "I'm sorry for your loss." Emma was in the back seat. She saw everything. Martha lowered her voice. "She hasn't spoken since. Not one word." Martha reached for the child's hand, gently guiding her from the truck. The little girl moved like a sleepwalker, her dark hair hanging limply around a face too solemn for someone so young. What struck Amanda most were her eyes, hazel eyes that seemed to take in everything and nothing simultaneously. "Emma's deaf," Martha continued. "Has been since birth. She could read lips and use sign language before, but now—" She shrugged helplessly. "She shut down completely." Amanda frowned. "Martha, I'm not sure why you're here." "I'm hardly qualified." "I'm drowning, Amanda." The admission burst forth with unexpected force. "I'm 58 with arthritis in both knees and a job that barely pays the bills. I thought I could handle this, but Emma needs more than I can give." She trailed off. "I remembered you worked with trauma cases in the military with the dogs." "That was different." Amanda's tone was gentle but firm. "That was just working with handlers, not children. I'm not asking for charity. I'll pay what I can. I just need some help until I can figure something out more permanent." Before Amanda could respond, a low whine drew everyone's attention. Alpha had moved closer to Emma, his head tilted in apparent curiosity. The other shepherds watched intently from their respective positions. "Martha, maybe this isn't the best environment for her," Amanda said, eyeing the dogs. "These aren't trained therapy animals. Most of them are still recovering from their own trauma." But something unexpected was happening. Emma had turned toward Alpha, her vacant expression showing the first flicker of interest Amanda had seen. The massive shepherd approached slowly, his movements deliberate and gentle in a way that surprised even Amanda. When he was about 2 feet away, he lowered himself to his belly, inching forward on the ground, a submissive posture Amanda had rarely seen him use. Martha tensed, but Amanda raised a hand to stop her intervention. "Wait," she whispered. Emma took a small step forward, then another. She knelt before Alpha, reaching out a tentative hand. The dog remained perfectly still as small fingers touched the fur between his ears. Then something remarkable happened. Emma placed her other hand against Alpha's throat, feeling the vibrations of his low, rumbling whine. In the next moment, Shadow emerged from beneath the porch steps, the most fearful of all the dogs approaching a human she didn't know. One by one the others followed Duchess limping forward, Scout with his missing ear, Ranger overcoming his usual skittishness. They formed a loose circle around the little girl, maintaining a respectful distance while displaying a collective curiosity that Amanda had never witnessed. "I've never seen anything like this," Amanda murmured. "They're never this calm with strangers." Emma sat fully on the ground now, seemingly unafraid, as Alpha rested his massive head in her lap. The faintest ghost of a smile touched her lips, so brief Amanda almost missed it. "They sense something in her," Martha said softly. "Don't they?" Amanda nodded slowly. In her years of training military dogs, she'd occasionally witnessed this phenomenon, animals recognizing a kindred spirit in someone who'd experienced profound trauma. The speechless understanding between wounded souls. "I can watch her during the days," Amanda found herself saying, surprising herself as much as Martha. "Just until you find something more permanent." Relief washed over Martha's face. "Thank you, Amanda. I'll bring her tomorrow morning if that works." As Martha gently led Emma back to the truck, the little girl glanced over her shoulder at the dogs. Alpha sat watching her departure, his posture alert and attentive. The connection between them, forged in mere minutes, struck Amanda as something significant, something she couldn't quite explain. What Amanda couldn't possibly know was that this unexpected arrangement would soon unearth secrets buried for years, challenging everything she believed about family, healing, and second chances. The first week passed in a rhythm of cautious observation. Amanda would sit on her farmhouse porch, coffee in hand, watching as Emma explored the property each morning. The dogs, ever her silent shadows, formed a protective circle around the child. What struck Amanda most was the intentionality of their formation. Alpha always took point position, while Shadow and Duchess flanked Emma's sides. The others created a perimeter, rotating positions throughout the day as if on some predetermined schedule. "It's like they're speaking their own language," Amanda remarked to Martha one evening during pickup. "I've trained military dogs for decades, but I've never seen anything like this level of coordination without commands." Martha shrugged, her eyes tired from her double shift at the diner. Does it matter how it works if it's helping her? And it was helping. By the second week, subtle changes emerged in Emma's demeanor. Her vacant stare gave way to moments of focused attention. She began carrying a small notebook, sketching crude pictures of the dogs with surprising detail for a 5-year-old's hand. The breakthrough came on the 14th day. Amanda was hanging laundry when she noticed Emma sitting cross-legged in the center of the yard, 12 of the shepherds forming a perfect circle around her with Alpha and Shadow positioned directly in front. The little girl raised her right hand slowly, and to Amanda's astonishment, all 14 dogs sat in perfect unison. Emma's left hand moved in a sweeping motion, and the dogs laid down in sequence, creating a ripple effect around the circle. When both her hands lifted, the dogs rose to standing. It wasn't just obedience, it was synchronized, deliberate, and undeniably intentional. "How in God's name?" Amanda whispered to herself. She approached slowly, not wanting to disrupt whatever remarkable connection was unfolding. Emma didn't acknowledge her presence, continuing instead with her silent commands. When Amanda knelt beside her, she noticed something she'd missed from a distance. Emma's hands weren't just moving randomly. They were signing. Amanda recognized some basic ASL from her military days, working with a deaf canine handler. What stunned her was that the dogs appeared to understand these signs, responding to each with precise movements. "You taught them sign language," Amanda said aloud, knowing Emma couldn't hear her, but needing to vocalize her amazement nonetheless. When Emma finally turned to look at her, something had changed in the child's eyes. A spark of life had returned, small but undeniable. She reached for Amanda's hand, placing it against Alpha's throat, then made a sign Amanda didn't recognize. Alpha gave a short, sharp bark. Emma repeated the gesture, and Alpha barked twice. Another sign, 3 barks. Emma was showing her the commands. That evening, after Martha had taken Emma home, Amanda pulled out the dusty photo album she'd stored in the attic after James died. She found what she was looking for near the back pictures of Ryan from his teenage years. In one, he stood with his arm around a pretty dark-haired girl at some school function. Amanda had never learned the girl's name. Ryan had always been private about his relationships, but something about the girl's eyes nagged at Amanda's memory. She found herself reaching for the crude drawing Emma had left behind, a sketch of Alpha with surprisingly well-rendered eyes. The resemblance struck her with physical force. Emma had Amanda's own eyes, the same hazel color and slightly upturned shape that had passed from Amanda to Ryan, and now, apparently, to this silent little girl who communicated with dogs better than people. "It can't be," Amanda whispered to the empty room. Alpha padded over, resting his large head on her knee as if sensing her distress. She absently stroked his fur, her mind racing with possibilities too painful to fully consider. The following morning, Sheriff Tom Mitchell's patrol car came rolling up the driveway. Unlike Martha's rattling pickup, his arrival set all 14 dogs barking a warning chorus that brought Amanda to the porch with a sense of dread. "Morning, Amanda," the sheriff called, staying prudently by his vehicle. At 60, Tom had the weathered face of a man who'd seen enough trouble to spot it coming a mile away. They'd known each other since high school, before life had taken them in different directions. "What brings you out this way, Tom?" Amanda asked, signaling Alpha to stand down. "Complaints," he said simply. "Got 3 calls this week about the number of dogs you're keeping out here. County ordinance says 3 dogs per residential property, unless specially zoned." Amanda finished for him. "I'm aware." Tom sighed, removing his hat. "Look, I'm not here officially. Not yet. But Victoria Spencer over at County Services is making noise, says it's unsanitary and potentially dangerous. Word's also gotten around that you've got a young girl out here most days." Amanda felt her jaw tighten. "Martha Thompson's niece. I'm just helping out temporarily. That the Harper girl, the one who survived that wreck on Highway 40. When Amanda nodded, Tom's expression softened. "Terrible business, that. How's she doing?" "Better," Amanda said cautiously. The dog seemed to help. Tom glanced at the shepherds arrayed around the yard, each watching him with wary attention. "They seem well-behaved enough, but 14, Amanda. After what happened with your military unit, that was different," she cut him off sharply. "These dogs aren't trained for combat." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, heavy with shared history. Tom had been one of the few people Amanda had confided in about the training incident in Afghanistan that had left 3 handlers injured, and Amanda questioning everything about her methods. "I'll buy you some time," Tom finally said. "Tell folks I've inspected the property and found no immediate concerns. But you need to get this sorted. Amanda, either get proper zoning or find homes for some of these animals." After he left, Amanda stood on the porch long after his car disappeared down the driveway. The weight of his warning settled alongside the growing suspicion about Emma's identity. Both threatened the fragile peace she'd established since the flood. That night, Amanda did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote to Ryan, addressing the letter to his last known military posting. The words came haltingly at first, then, in a torrent, "I believe your daughter is here with me. She has your eyes, your stubborn chin. She speaks with her hands to 14 German shepherds who obey her as if they understand every word. One of them wears your unit's tags. If you ever cared about anything I taught you, respond to this letter. She needs you. I need answers." Victoria Spencer arrived the following morning, county clipboard in hand and skepticism etched into her narrow features. At 55, Victoria had transformed from high school wallflower to administrative powerhouse through sheer force of will and rigorous adherence to regulations. She parked her immaculate sedan precisely parallel to Amanda's fence line. "Miss Sullivan," she greeted with professional detachment, "I'm conducting an initial welfare assessment. I understand you're housing 14 canines on a residentially zoned property and hosting a minor without proper daycare licensing." Amanda matched Victoria's formality. "I've applied for proper zoning variance and temporary guardianship. Both applications are pending." Victoria made a non-committal note on her clipboard. "I'll need to inspect the premises and observe the child's interaction with the animals. Emma isn't here today," Amanda lied smoothly. In truth, Martha had dropped her off an hour earlier, and Amanda had sent them both to the back pasture with Alpha and Shadow as lookouts. Martha had appointments in Nashville. Victoria's thin lips pressed tighter. "Nevertheless, I'll need to evaluate the living conditions." The inspection proceeded with excruciating thoroughness. Victoria documenting every water bowl, sleeping area, and fence height with meticulous precision. She photographed the food storage, noted the twice-daily cleaning schedule, and reluctantly acknowledged the impressive health records Amanda maintained for each animal. "The dogs appear adequately cared for," Victoria finally conceded, though her expression suggested she'd hoped to find otherwise. However, caring for animals and supervising a traumatized child with special needs are vastly different responsibilities. I trained military working dogs in active combat zones for 22 years, Amanda reminded her. I think I can handle a farm environment. Victoria's gaze sharpened. Yes, until the incident in Afghanistan that left 3 handlers permanently injured. Incident report cited handler error in stress response training, if I recall correctly. The precision of the jab, referencing information that shouldn't have been easily accessible, momentarily stunned Amanda. You've done your homework thoroughly, Victoria nodded. Just as I've researched the Harper accident. Devastating tragedy. The child witnessed everything. Her mother's death was instantaneous, but her father survived for nearly 40 minutes before paramedics could extract him. Amanda felt a chill despite the warm spring air. Why are you telling me this? Because trauma requires professional intervention, Miss Sullivan, not dogs, however well behaved. Victoria tucked her clipboard under her arm. I'll be submitting my preliminary report to Family Services. Until your applications are processed, I strongly advise against continuing this unsanctioned arrangement. After Victoria's car disappeared down the driveway, Amanda hurried to the back pasture. She found Emma sitting beneath an ancient oak tree flanked by Alpha and Shadow, while Martha dozed against the trunk. The other shepherds formed a perimeter around them, watchful and alert. She's gone, Amanda announced quietly, watching as Martha startled awake. But she'll be back with reinforcements. Over the following weeks, Emma's remarkable progress continued despite the looming threats. Martha reported she'd begun using simple signs again with her aunt, basic communication that had been absent since the accident. During her days at the farm, Emma's connection with the dogs deepened. She no longer merely commanded them. She communicated with them, creating an intricate language of gestures, touches, and sounds. Amanda documented everything, partly for the inevitable legal battles ahead, partly to create a record for Ryan if he ever responded to her letter. She captured videos of Emma teaching Scout to retrieve specific items based on signed commands. She photographed the moment Duchess, despite her damaged hip, stood on her hind legs in response to Emma's upraised hands. Most remarkably, she recorded the first structured performances, Emma conducting the dogs through sequences of barks and howls that gradually evolved from chaotic noise into patterned sound. Each evening after Emma left, Amanda visited the roadside mailbox, hoping for a response from Ryan that never came. The situation reached a tipping point when the local newspaper published a front-page article titled, "Child Welfare Concerns Raised Over Dog Girl Situation," and the piece quoted anonymous concerned citizens and highlighted Victoria's ongoing investigation, though clearly slanted towards sensationalism. The article included one crucial detail, a blurry photograph of Emma conducting the dogs, her face bright with engagement for perhaps the first time since her parents' deaths. The image transformed the narrative overnight. Pastor Williams' proposed community meeting suddenly overflowed with attendees. The church basement buzzed with conflicting opinions as Victoria presented her case for intervention. While Martha tearfully described Emma's improvements, Sheriff Mitchell maintained professional neutrality while acknowledging he'd observed no safety violations on Amanda's property. The unexpected advocate emerged in Dr. Helen Martinez, Riverbrook's only practicing psychologist, who had seen the newspaper photograph and recognized its significance. "What we're witnessing," she explained to the crowded room, "appears to be a form of animal-assisted therapy. These dogs are creating a bridge for Emma to reconnect with the world after profound trauma. Traditional therapy hasn't reached her, but this connection has." Victoria remained unmoved. "Unregulated, unsupervised interaction with 14 large rescue dogs is hardly therapeutic. It's dangerous." "Then regulate it," suggested Pastor Williams. "Supervise it, but don't destroy it." The meeting ended without resolution. But the community had begun to divide into clear factions. Some, led by Victoria, insisted on strict adherence to regulations designed to protect children in crisis. Others, moved by Emma's story and the visible progress captured in that single photograph, advocated for flexibility. In extraordinary circumstances, Amanda, typically avoidant of town politics, now found herself thrust into the center of a growing controversy. More concerning were the whispers about Emma's parentage that had begun circulating questions about why Amanda Sullivan, estranged from her own son, had taken such interest in this particular child. The guardianship hearing approached with increasing momentum. Martha, overwhelmed by the scrutiny and her own limitations, had fully supported Amanda's application for temporary custody. What neither woman anticipated was Victoria's counter-petition, arguing that both were unsuitable guardians, Martha due to work obligations and financial constraints, Amanda due to her isolated lifestyle and the hazardous environment presented by the dogs. During one of Emma's therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, which now incorporated the dogs as active participants, the psychologist made an observation that changed Amanda's perspective. "These aren't just random behaviors," Dr. Martinez noted, watching Emma position the dogs in specific formations. "She's recreating safety. Look at how she always keeps Alpha between her and potential threats." "Is that significant?" Amanda asked. "Trauma survivors often develop elaborate systems to regain control." Dr. Martinez explained, "What's remarkable is that Emma has enlisted these animals in her recovery. They're not just companions, they're extensions of her processing mechanism." Later that week, during a particularly intense afternoon when Emma seemed more withdrawn than usual, Amanda found her sitting alone in the barn. Alpha's massive form curled protectively around her. The little girl was holding something, a worn photograph pulled from her small backpack. Amanda approached slowly, giving Emma time to acknowledge her presence. When Amanda knelt beside her, Emma turned the photograph so she could see. It showed a younger Sarah with her arm around a man in military fatigues, Ryan, unmistakably. Though his face was partially obscured by sunlight, Amanda's breath caught in her throat. "You know who that is?" she signed, using the basic ASL she'd been practicing. Emma nodded slowly, then made a sign Amanda recognized immediately, the sign for father. "Yes," Amanda signed back, her hands trembling slightly. "That's your father. My son." Emma's eyes widened slightly, the connection registering in her expression. She pressed her small palm against Amanda's cheek, then pointed to her own eyes. The message was clear. Even without signs, she recognized the similarity. That night, after Emma had gone home, Amanda sat alone on her porch, wrestling with the implications of what she'd learned. Emma knew Ryan was her father, suggesting Sarah had at least shared that much with her daughter. But did Ryan know about Emma? The question haunted her as she watched the shepherds patrol the property boundaries in the gathering dusk. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Jessica arrived without Emma, her face drawn with worry. "She's running a fever," she explained. "Nothing serious, just a childhood bug," but she was distraught at the idea of missing her day with the dogs. "She made me promise to give you this." Jessica handed Amanda a carefully folded drawing, a detailed sketch of what appeared to be the accident scene, rendered with unsettling precision for a 5-year-old. In the corner, almost as an afterthought, Emma had drawn a small figure watching from a distance, a man in what looked like military attire. "Jessica," Amanda said carefully, "did Sarah ever mention Ryan Sullivan to you?" Jessica's expression flickered with recognition. "Ryan. That was the boy she was seeing before she left for college. Is he—" "Emma's father," Amanda confirmed. "My son." Jessica sank into a porch chair, visibly processing this revelation. "Sarah never told me who Emma's father was, just that he was away in the military and couldn't be part of their lives. David adopted Emma legally when they married. But Emma seems to know Ryan is her father, Amanda pressed. Did Sarah tell her? There were pictures, Jessica admitted. Sarah kept a box of them. Emma found them about a year ago and started asking questions. Sarah told her the basics, that her biological father was a soldier who couldn't come home. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Martinez, who had begun making regular visits to observe Emma's interactions with the dogs as part of her research. Amanda showed her Emma's drawing, watching the psychologist's expression carefully. This level of detail is unusual, Dr. Martinez noted, studying the sketch. Children Emma's age typically draw symbolic representations, not realistic scenes. The perspective here is almost photographic. What does that mean? Jessica asked. It could suggest several things. Dr. Martinez explained, sometimes trauma is encoded visually with extreme precision. The brain captures every detail as a survival mechanism. Or, Amanda prompted. Or Emma is remembering something she observed but didn't fully understand at the time. Dr. Martinez pointed to the figure in the corner. Who's this supposed to be? I think it might be Ryan, Amanda said. But that's impossible. He's been overseas for years. Dr. Martinez looked thoughtful. I'd like to try something when Emma feels better. With your permission, I'd like to use a technique called guided drawing where I ask specific questions while she draws. It might help us understand what she's processing. 2 days later, Emma returned to the farm, seemingly recovered from her illness, but quieter than before. During her session with Dr. Martinez, she produced 3 more drawings, each showing different perspectives of the accident scene, each including the distant military figure. Emma, Dr. Martinez signed carefully. Who is the man watching? Emma's response was immediate and clear. She signed father, followed by sad and hiding. Dr. Martinez exchanged a glance with Amanda. Ask her when she saw him. Amanda requested. The psychologist relayed the question. Emma's answer sent chills down Amanda's spine. Hospital, Daddy crying, other Daddy sleeping. Later, alone with Amanda. Dr. Martinez attempted to make sense of Emma's communications. It's possible she's constructing a narrative to process her loss, she suggested. Children sometimes blend reality with wishful thinking, especially after trauma. Or, Amanda said slowly, Ryan was actually there? At the hospital after the accident. Would that be possible? Amanda shook her head. I don't know. Last I heard, he was deployed overseas. That evening, another visitor arrived at the farm, Pastor Williams, carrying a casserole dish and a concerned expression. He'd been a steady presence since the community meeting, offering practical support and moral guidance as Amanda navigated the increasingly complex situation. Victoria's pushing for an emergency hearing, he informed her after they'd settled on the porch. She's convinced Judge Franklin to expedite the case based on evolving circumstances. What circumstances? Amanda demanded. The rumor that Emma might be related to you has gained traction, Pastor Williams explained. Victoria's argument is that you concealed a potential conflict of interest in your guardianship application. I didn't conceal anything, Amanda protested. I had suspicions, but no confirmation until recently. I believe you, the pastor assured her, but the timing looks suspicious to those inclined to think the worst. As Pastor Williams departed, promising to rally community support for the hearing, Alpha's unusual behavior caught Amanda's attention. The shepherd, typically calm and controlled, paced restlessly near the front gate, periodically emitting low growls toward the main road. Amanda initially dismissed it as response to local wildlife, but his persistence triggered memories of his military training indicators. Someone was watching the property. Sheriff Mitchell confirmed her suspicions the following morning, pulling into her driveway with unusual formality. "Victoria's gotten approval for surveillance," he explained without preamble. "County vehicle's been parked a quarter-mile down the road since yesterday. They're documenting everyone coming and going." "Is that legal?" Amanda demanded. "Public road." Tom shrugged apologetically. "I thought you should know before Emma arrives today." The warning allowed Amanda to prepare, but it also forced a difficult decision. After Tom left, she called Jessica. "Don't bring Emma today," she instructed. "Victoria's watching the farm. She's building a case against both of us." Jessica's voice trembled on the other end. "But Emma's already dressed and waiting by the door. She gets so upset now if we don't go." "I know," Amanda said, her throat tight. "But we need to be strategic. The hearing's in 3 days. If Victoria documents any perceived risk between now and then—" "I understand," Jessica whispered. "But you try telling a traumatized 5-year-old that she can't see the only things bringing her comfort." After hanging up, Amanda surveyed her property with fresh eyes, seeing it as Victoria and the courts would see it: 14 large dogs, some with visible scars and lingering behavioral issues from their own traumas, a remote location without nearby neighbors, a 65-year-old woman with a complicated military past and a fractured family history. Against that backdrop, what chance did she have of convincing a family court judge that this environment represented Emma's best hope for healing? The sound of tires on gravel interrupted her thoughts. Jessica's pickup appeared despite Amanda's warning, with Emma's small face visible in the passenger window. Before Amanda could react, the child was out of the vehicle and running toward the gate where Alpha already waited, tail sweeping in measured arcs of recognition. "I couldn't stop her," Jessica called, hurrying after her niece. "She started signing dogs over and over, then went completely rigid when I tried to explain." Amanda glanced toward the county surveillance vehicle, now clearly visible down the road. "They're photographing everything," she warned. "Let them," Jessica said with sudden defiance. "Let them see exactly what they're trying to destroy." The Riverbrook County Courthouse stood at the center of town, its limestone facade imposing despite the building's modest size. A small crowd had gathered on the steps, some holding handmade signs reading, "Let Emma Heal" and "Dogs Save Lives." Pastor Williams moved among them, encouraging restraint and respectful behavior. Victoria Spencer waited inside, flanked by 2 county attorneys and armed with stacks of documentation. Her thin smile suggested confidence in the proceedings' outcome. "Quite the circus you've created," she remarked as Amanda approached, "though I suppose public sentiment was always your strategy." Amanda met her gaze steadily. "This isn't about strategy, Victoria. It's about a child's well-being." "Precisely my concern." Before Amanda could respond, the courtroom doors opened. Judge Harriet Franklin, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with a reputation for strict adherence to precedent, surveyed the gathering crowd with evident disapproval. "This is a closed family court proceeding," she announced. "Only parties directly involved in the case may enter." A murmur of disappointment rippled through the supporters, but they dispersed without protest. Pastor Williams caught Amanda's eye, nodding encouragingly before joining the exodus. Inside the courtroom, Judge Franklin established strict parameters. "This is not a criminal proceeding," she reminded everyone. "Our sole concern is determining the most appropriate guardianship arrangement for Emma Harper following the tragic loss of her parents." Victoria presented the county's case first, methodically outlining what she described as significant environmental and safety concerns at Amanda's property. Photographs of the 14 German Shepherds were displayed prominently, accompanied by detailed reports on county ordinances governing animal ownership. Ms. Sullivan maintains 14 large breed dogs with documented histories of trauma and neglect. Victoria emphasized, Several display ongoing behavioral issues, including aggression toward strangers, anxiety responses to loud noises, and resource guarding. This environment presents unacceptable risks for a 5-year-old child, particularly one with special needs. The judge frowned, making notes as Victoria continued her presentation. Statistics on dog bites, property liability, and zoning violations followed in meticulous sequence. Furthermore, Victoria added, we have serious concerns about Ms. Sullivan's qualifications as a caregiver. While she has extensive experience with military working dogs, her career ended following an incident that resulted in handler injuries. This suggests potential judgment issues in high-stress situations, precisely the environment created when combining multiple rescue animals with a traumatized child. Jessica squeezed Amanda's hand under the table, a gesture of solidarity against the clinical dismantling of their arrangement. Emma sat between them, her attention focused entirely on the drawing clutched in her hands. When Victoria finally concluded, Judge Franklin turned to Amanda's attorney, a young public defender named Thomas Reed, who had taken their case pro bono after hearing about it from Pastor Williams. Your Honor, Thomas began, the county's presentation emphasizes potential risks while completely overlooking documented benefits. We intend to demonstrate that Emma Harper has made remarkable progress in Ms. Sullivan's care, progress that traditional therapeutic approaches failed to achieve in the months following her parents' deaths. He presented Jessica's videos, starting with footage from Emma's early days at the farm, where she moved like a sleepwalker, emotionally disconnected from her surroundings. The progression continued through weeks of interaction with the dogs, culminating in the most recent performance where Emma conducted the shepherds through their remarkable vocalizations. Dr. Martinez took the stand next, providing professional context for what the court had witnessed. What we're seeing is a therapeutic breakthrough, she explained. Emma experienced what psychologists call selective mutism following severe trauma, a condition where a child physically capable of speech becomes unable to communicate verbally. Traditional therapy requires establishing trust and safety before communication can resume. She gestured toward the video screen where Emma's face showed animation and focus. These dogs have created that safe space for her. The shepherd's nonverbal communication mirrors her own experience. They understand each other without words. This has become a bridge back to engagement with the world. Judge Franklin studied the psychologist with measured skepticism. Are you suggesting that 14 rescue dogs provide better therapy than trained professionals in this specific case? Yes. Dr. Martinez answered without hesitation. These animals have accomplished in weeks what months of conventional therapy couldn't achieve. Emma is using sign language again. She's demonstrating emotional regulation, focus, and even joy. The clinical evidence is unequivocal. Victoria rose to cross-examine. Dr. Martinez, isn't it true that animal therapy typically involves specially trained therapy animals in controlled environments with certified handlers? That's the conventional approach, yes. And none of Ms. Sullivan's 14 German Shepherds have such certification? Correct. Dr. Martinez conceded the point, but added, unconventional approaches sometimes yield extraordinary results. The evidence of Emma's improvement speaks for itself. When Jessica took the stand, her testimony focused on the practical realities of caring for Emma while working full-time. She acknowledged her limitations honestly, describing the transformation she'd witnessed since Emma began spending days at Amanda's farm. Before, she wouldn't eat unless I begged her. She didn't sleep through the night. She stared at walls for hours. Jessica recalled, her voice breaking. Now she has purpose again. She draws pictures. She uses her signs sometimes. When she knows she's going to see the dogs, she smiles, actually smiles. Victoria's cross-examination was gentle but pointed. Ms. Harper, do you believe you're capable of providing full-time care for your niece, given your work schedule and financial situation? Jessica hesitated before answering truthfully. It's been harder than I expected. I love Emma with all my heart, but I don't always know how to reach her. Amanda does. And if the court determines that neither you nor Ms. Sullivan are suitable guardians, would you support Emma's placement in a specialized foster home with access to professional services? The question hung in the air, its implications clear. Before Jessica could respond, a commotion erupted outside the courtroom. Alpha's distinctive bark echoed through the closed doors, followed by multiple voices raised in alarm. Judge Franklin banged her gavel. "Bailiff, please investigate that disturbance." The doors swung open to reveal Sheriff Mitchell restraining Alpha, who had somehow tracked his way into the courthouse. The massive shepherd wasn't struggling or showing aggression. He stood calmly beside the sheriff, his gaze fixed on Emma. "I'm sorry, Your Honor," Sheriff Mitchell explained, slightly out of breath. "This dog showed up at the courthouse entrance and made his way inside before anyone could stop him. He hasn't threatened anyone, just seems determined to get in here." At the sight of Alpha, Emma's entire demeanor transformed. She slid from her chair and moved toward the dog before anyone could react, her hands forming rapid signs that made the shepherd's tail wag in response. "Order," Judge Franklin demanded, though her voice lacked conviction as she witnessed the interaction. "Sheriff Mitchell, please remove that animal from my courtroom." "Your Honor," Amanda interjected, rising to her feet. "This is Alpha, the primary therapy dog in Emma's recovery. His presence here demonstrates exactly what we've been trying to explain." The judge's expression wavered between strict procedural adherence and the undeniable evidence before her. Emma had wrapped her arms around Alpha's neck, burying her face in his fur while he stood perfectly still, protective but gentle. "Let the record show," Judge Franklin finally said, "that the child has demonstrated a significant attachment to the animal in question." She sighed deeply. "Sheriff, since the dog appears well behaved, he may remain for the duration of Ms. Sullivan's testimony, but this is highly irregular." Alpha settled at Emma's feet when she returned to her seat, his presence visibly calming her. The courtroom's atmosphere had shifted. Victoria's clinical argument suddenly seemed abstract compared to the tangible bond everyone had just witnessed. When Amanda finally took the stand, she spoke with a directness that had characterized her military career. She acknowledged the unorthodox nature of Emma's therapy, but emphasized the results. She detailed her experience with trauma recovery, both human and canine, and her plans to pursue proper certification for several of the shepherds as therapy animals. "These dogs aren't just pets," she explained. "They're survivors, just like Emma. They understand pain and fear in ways most humans can't. That shared experience created a connection that's helping her heal." Judge Franklin leaned forward. "Ms. Sullivan, I've reviewed the county's concerns about your property's zoning and the number of animals you maintain. How do you respond to these legitimate regulatory issues?" "I filed for proper zoning variance as an animal sanctuary and therapy center," Amanda replied. "Pastor Williams and several community members have pledged support for necessary modifications to meet code requirements. I'm not asking for exceptions to the rules. I'm asking for time to bring everything into compliance while maintaining Emma's therapeutic environment." Victoria's cross-examination focused relentlessly on the Afghanistan incident that had ended Amanda's military career. "Isn't it true that your training methods were questioned after 3 handlers were injured during an exercise you supervised?" Amanda had anticipated this line of attack. "Yes, I pushed too hard, too fast with dogs that weren't ready. I've carried that mistake with me for years. And yet now you're suggesting the court entrust you with a traumatized child." "I'm suggesting," Amanda countered, "that mistakes teach us more than successes ever could. What happened in Afghanistan showed me the importance of patience, of respecting individual healing timelines, of creating safety before expecting progress. Those are precisely the principles that have helped Emma begin to reconnect with the world. Before Victoria could continue, the courtroom doors opened again. A tall man in worn jeans and a military-style haircut entered quietly, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Amanda. The resemblance between them was unmistakable, the same determined jaw, the same way of holding tension in their shoulders. Ryan Sullivan had come home. Alpha's reaction was immediate, a soft whine of recognition that drew everyone's attention to the newcomer. Judge Franklin, clearly exasperated by the ongoing interruptions, banged her gavel. "Sir, this is a closed proceeding. You'll need to—" "Your Honor," Ryan interrupted, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his expression. "My name is Ryan Sullivan. I believe the child in this case may be my daughter." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Amanda stared at her son, seeing in his face the same realization that had been growing in her own mind for weeks. Victoria appeared genuinely shocked, hurriedly conferring with her colleagues. Judge Franklin's gavel came down with decisive force. "This proceeding is temporarily adjourned while this new information is verified. All parties will remain available." She fixed Ryan with a stern gaze. "Mr. Sullivan, I'll see you and counsel in my chambers immediately." As court officers cleared the room, Emma remained beside Alpha, apparently oblivious to the dramatic development unfolding around her. She continued signing to the shepherd, who responded with subtle shifts in posture and expression that suggested genuine communication. Jessica approached Amanda, her expression a mixture of confusion and hope. "Is it true? Is he really—" "Yes," Amanda responded, watching her son disappear into the judge's chambers. "And now everything changes." The antique clock in the courthouse hallway ticked with maddening precision as Amanda sat on a hard wooden bench, every muscle tense. Beside her, Jessica kept Emma occupied with simple games while Alpha remained vigilant at the child's feet, permitted to stay by a judge who seemed increasingly willing to bend procedure in the face of extraordinary circumstances. The closed-door meeting in Judge Franklin's chambers had stretched past 30 minutes. Each passing moment amplified the storm of emotions churning through Amanda. Hope and fear, anger and longing, all tangled together in an impossible knot. 8 years of silence stretched between her last conversation with Ryan and his unexpected appearance today. "Did you know," Jessica finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "that Ryan was Emma's father?" Amanda's fingers found Alpha's tags beneath her blouse. "I suspected. The timing fit. Her eyes are his, and mine too, I suppose." She sighed. "But no, I didn't know for certain. Ryan left after an argument about his future. I wanted him to follow family tradition into service. He wanted something else. And Sarah, Emma's mother. Did you know her?" "Not really. Ryan was private about his relationships." Amanda's gaze drifted to Emma, who was teaching Alpha to respond to a new hand signal. "It seems they were more serious than he ever let on." The chamber's door finally opened. Ryan emerged first, his expression unreadable as he conferred briefly with Thomas Reed. Victoria followed, her usual confidence noticeably diminished as she retreated to the far end of the hallway with her legal team. Judge Franklin appeared last, summoning the bailiff. "We'll reconvene in 10 minutes, she announced. "Mr. Reed, please prepare your client for additional testimony." Ryan approached slowly, uncertainty evident in his posture. Up close. The years of separation revealed themselves in subtle ways, new lines around his eyes, a scar along his jawline, the slight favor he showed his left leg when walking. "Mom," he said simply, stopping several feet away as if unsure of his welcome. Amanda rose, maintaining the distance between them. "You got my letter." 3 days ago. I've been overseas with limited communication. A military contractor job. His eyes shifted to Emma. Is that her? Yes. Ryan swallowed hard. She has Sarah's nose, her chin. You never told me about Sarah after you left. Would you have listened? We weren't exactly on speaking terms. Regret colored his words. Sarah and I were together my last year here. When I left for basic training, she told me she needed space. I didn't know she was pregnant. By the time I found out, she was married to someone else. David Anderson. Did you ever meet Lily before? Ryan shook his head. Sarah sent pictures sometimes. She said David was a good father, that Emma was happy. I respected their family. His voice caught. Then I lost track when my unit deployed. The letter from the military attorneys arrived 3 weeks ago. Sarah had listed me as Emma's biological father in her will, but the notification got tangled in red tape since I was overseas. The bailiff called them back into the courtroom before Amanda could respond. They filed in silently, the weight of secrets and lost years hanging between them. Judge Franklin wasted no time once proceedings resumed. Mr. Sullivan has provided documentation confirming he is Emma Harper's biological father, though David Anderson was her legal father until his death. This changes the nature of our proceedings considerably. She turned to Ryan. Mr. Sullivan, do you intend to petition for custody of your daughter? Ryan straightened. Yes, Your Honor, but I want to be clear. I'm not looking to disrupt what's helping her. From what I've observed and what my mother has documented, Emma's connection with these dogs is extraordinary. I wouldn't want to separate her from that. Nevertheless, Judge Franklin continued, as biological parent, you have presumptive right to custody, barring evidence of unfitness. Are you prepared for the responsibility of raising a special needs child who has experienced significant trauma? I've spent the last 8 years in war zones. Your Honor, I understand trauma, and I'm willing to learn whatever else I need to know. Ryan glanced toward Amanda. With help, Victoria rose. Your Honor, while Mr. Sullivan's paternity changes certain aspects of this case, it doesn't eliminate our concerns about the environment at Ms. Sullivan's property. 14 German Shepherds still present a safety risk, regardless of who has custody. I'm aware of the county's position. Ms. Spencer. Judge Franklin's tone suggested growing impatience. However, I'm equally cognizant of Dr. Martinez's expert testimony regarding the therapeutic benefits of these animals for Emma. She addressed Ryan directly. What are your intentions regarding living arrangements and Emma's ongoing care? Ryan's response carried the directness Amanda recognized from his childhood decisive once his mind was made up. My military contract ended last month. I came back to Riverbrook planning to rebuild relationships and figure out next steps. His gaze shifted between Amanda and Emma. Now those next steps seem clearer. I'd like to stay at my mother's property, help bring it into compliance with county requirements, and create a stable home for Emma where she can continue the therapy that's clearly helping her. The judge turned to Victoria. Does the county have specific requirements that would allow Ms. Sullivan's property to legally function as both a residence and animal therapy facility? Caught off guard by this practical approach, Victoria hesitated before responding. There are pathways through proper zoning variances, structural modifications, and certification processes, but these would take time and significant resources. Then, perhaps, Judge Franklin suggested, we can craft an arrangement that addresses everyone's primary concern. Her proposed solution was unexpectedly pragmatic. Ryan would receive temporary custody of Emma, conditional upon residing at Amanda's property and completing parenting classes specialized for traumatized children. Amanda would retain the dogs but would be required to begin certification processes for those showing therapy potential. The property would need specific modifications to create separate, safe areas for residential and animal therapy functions. Most significantly, Victoria's department would provide oversight without removing Emma from the environment that had sparked her recovery. This arrangement, Judge Franklin emphasized, is temporary and conditional. I expect monthly progress reports from all parties. If at any point Emma's well-being appears compromised, I will not hesitate to order immediate changes. She looked directly at Emma, who remained focused on Alpha while the adults decided her fate. The court's primary concern is this child's recovery from devastating trauma. The evidence suggests these dogs have facilitated progress where traditional methods failed. I see no compelling reason to disrupt that connection without giving this arrangement an opportunity to succeed properly. Victoria appeared ready to object, but seemed to reconsider as she observed Emma's calm interaction with Alpha. Instead, she nodded stiffly. The county will cooperate with Your Honor's order while maintaining appropriate oversight. Outside the courthouse, rain had begun to fall, gentle spring showers that somehow felt like cleansing. Pastor Williams waited with a small group of supporters, umbrellas raised against the weather. Their anxious expressions shifted to cautious optimism as Thomas explained the judge's ruling. "It's conditional," he emphasized. "There's work ahead to make this arrangement permanent." Sheriff Mitchell approached as the gathering dispersed. "I'd say congratulations are in order, but I suspect the hard part's just beginning." He nodded toward Ryan. "Welcome home, son. Been a while." "Yes, sir," Ryan replied with the automatic respect instilled during childhood. "Longer than it should have been." "Well, your timing could have been worse." The sheriff smiled slightly. "I'll help where I can with the county requirements. Might smooth things with Victoria if you let her feel like she's maintaining some control over the situation." The drive back to the farm unfolded in awkward silence. Jessica had taken Emma home to pack essential belongings, leaving Amanda and Ryan to confront 8 years of absence. Alpha rode in the truck bed, seemingly content despite the light rain, occasionally pressing his nose against the rear window as if checking on his humans. "How did you end up with him?" Ryan finally asked, nodding toward the shepherd. "Alpha was with my unit until an IED incident 3 years ago. They told me he was being retired stateside, but I lost track during my recovery." Amanda kept her eyes on the rain-slick road. "He found me during the flood. Swam up to the porch with those tags still around his neck. I didn't make the connection to you until later. We got separated during the explosion. By the time I was conscious again, they'd already evacuated him." Ryan's voice held the flat tone Amanda recognized from James, the way military men spoke of trauma they weren't ready to fully process. "I always wondered if he made it." The farm appeared through the rain, looking simultaneously familiar and changed through the lens of the day's events. Alpha leapt from the truck before it fully stopped, conducting a quick perimeter check before settling on the porch steps. "He still clears the property," Ryan observed. "Some training never fades." Amanda turned off the engine. "None of them are just pets. They all serve a purpose here. Duchess watches the eastern boundary. Scout and Ranger take the west. The others have their assignments too." She hesitated before adding, "Like the unit you never wanted to join." Ryan flinched slightly. "Is that what today is about? Proving you were right about my path?" "No," Amanda answered honestly. "Today is about Emma. Everything else, that's just old wounds we never properly dressed." They sat in silence as rain drummed against the truck roof. 8 years of distance compressed into the small space between them. Words unsaid, apologies unoffered, forgiveness neither asked for nor granted. Alpha's sudden bark broke the moment. The shepherd stood alert at the end of the driveway where Jessica's truck had appeared, Emma's small face visible in the passenger window. "She doesn't know," Amanda said quietly. about you being her father. Jessica thought we should wait until after the hearing." Ryan nodded, tension visible in his shoulders. "How do you tell a 5-year-old who can't hear that you're her father that you didn't know she existed until her mother died?" "The same way she communicates with 14 German shepherds," Amanda replied, opening her door to the rain, one gesture at a time, with patience and without expectations. The first night in the farmhouse unfolded with the cautious choreography of strangers forced into intimacy. Amanda prepared the spare bedroom once Ryan still bearing the faded posters of his teenage years, while Jessica helped Emma unpack the small suitcase containing her essential belongings. Ryan hovered in doorways, simultaneously present and apart, uncertain of his place in this fragile new arrangement. Alpha refused to leave Emma's side, settling protectively at the foot of her bed, despite Amanda's half-hearted attempts to maintain some semblance of normal household boundaries. The other shepherds patrolled the property perimeter with heightened vigilance, sensing the emotional currents running through their territory. "She'll need consistency," Jessica advised as she prepared to leave, her eyes red-rimmed from the emotional day. "Same routines as much as possible, especially with the dogs." Amanda nodded, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility settling over the household. "We'll make it work. I know you will." Jessica hesitated at the door. "I didn't keep her from you intentionally. Ryan, Sarah never told me who Emma's biological father was. I only knew David had adopted her." Ryan managed a tight smile. "I believe you. Sarah had her reasons, I'm sure." After Jessica departed, an awkward silence descended over the farmhouse. Emma had already fallen asleep, emotionally exhausted from the day's events, with Alpha maintaining his vigil beside her bed. In the kitchen, Amanda prepared coffee while Ryan sat at the scarred wooden table where he'd done homework as a boy. "You kept everything the same," he observed, running his fingers over a set of initials he'd carved into the edge decades ago. "Easier that way." Amanda placed a mug before him. "Your father's death. Then you leaving changing things seemed unnecessarily painful." "I wrote letters," Ryan said suddenly. "Dozens of them. Never sent them." "Why not?" "Pride, anger, fear you'd throw them away unopened." He stared into his coffee. "Then too much time passed, and I couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap." Amanda's hands tightened around her own mug. "I thought about driving to your basic training graduation. Sat in the car for hours with the engine running but couldn't make myself go." "We're quite a pair," Ryan said with a sad laugh. "Stubborn to our own detriment. Dad always said the Sullivan family motto should be, too proud to apologize, too stubborn to forget." The mention of James brought a familiar ache to both of them. Ryan reached into his pocket, retrieving a worn photograph of himself in uniform with his arm around a smiling young woman with dark hair and Emma's delicate features. "This was Sarah," he said, placing it on the table between them. "Senior year, before everything fell apart. She wanted to go to college in California. I was set on proving myself by enlisting. Neither of us would bend." Amanda studied the photograph, seeing in Sarah's smile the ghost of the granddaughter sleeping upstairs. "When did you find out about Emma?" "Sarah sent a letter about 2 years after I left. By then, she was already married to David." Ryan's voice tightened. "She said he was a good man who wanted to adopt Emma legally. And you agreed. I was deploying to Afghanistan in 3 weeks. What kind of father could I be from a combat zone? I thought I was doing the right thing for everyone." "Does Emma know any of this?" "I doubt it. She was too young before the accident. Sarah sent photos occasionally, updates on birthdays. I kept everything." His fingers traced the edge of the photograph. "I never stopped thinking about her, wondering who she was becoming." The confession hung in the air between them. Not quite absolution, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Dawn arrived with new complications. Victoria Spencer appeared at the farm shortly after sunrise, accompanied by 2 county officials wielding clipboards and measuring tools. "Initial compliance inspection," she announced with professional detachment, "as stipulated in Judge Franklin's order." Amanda bit back her instinctive sharp response, mindful of Ryan watching from the porch with Emma still asleep upstairs. "We weren't expecting you quite so soon." "Precisely the point." Victoria checked her watch. "You have 6 weeks to implement required modifications. Today's inspection establishes the baseline." What followed was a methodical dismantling of their living arrangement. Every corner of the property measured, documented, and found wanting against county regulations. The dog sleeping areas needed improved weatherproofing. The fencing required reinforcement and heightened security measures. The house itself needed modifications to create clear separation between residential space and animal therapy areas. "Estimated costs will exceed $20,000, Victoria noted with clinical precision. "The county can provide a payment plan for permit fees, but construction expenses are your responsibility." Ryan stepped forward, his military bearing evident in his posture. "I have savings from my contractor work. We'll manage." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Admirable, but these modifications require licensed professionals with specific certifications. You can't simply hammer this together yourself." "We understand," Amanda interjected, sensing Ryan's growing frustration. "Is there anything else?" "Just one matter." Victoria's tone shifted slightly. "Dr. Martinez has offered to provide twice-weekly therapy sessions for Emma here at the property, incorporating the dog's presence. The county has approved this arrangement as part of her therapeutic plan." The unexpected concession momentarily stunned both Sullivans. Before either could respond, Alpha's distinctive bark signaled Emma's awakening. The shepherd appeared at the top of the porch steps, followed by the little girl still in her pajamas, her hair tousled from sleep. At the sight of strangers, Emma froze, her eyes widening with alarm. All 14 dogs immediately responded to her distress, each abandoning their positions to form a protective semicircle around the porch. The display wasn't aggressive, but the message was unmistakable. Victoria took an involuntary step backward. "I see the attachment is mutual," she observed, her clinical detachment slipping for the first time. Ryan approached Emma slowly, kneeling to her eye level and signing a simple greeting Jessica had taught him the previous evening. The child's response was hesitant, a slight loosening of her rigid posture, a flicker of recognition. "We'll continue this inspection tomorrow," Victoria decided, signaling her colleagues toward their vehicle. "Please ensure the animals are properly secured." After they departed, the day unfolded in tentative attempts at connection. Ryan followed Emma's established routine with the dogs, observing the intricate language she had developed with each shepherd. Amanda provided guidance from a distance, allowing father and daughter to navigate their own path toward understanding. By mid-afternoon, Emma had begun including Ryan in her communications, placing his hand against Alpha's throat to feel the vibrations of different barks, showing him how Scout responded to specific hand positions, small moments of connection, fragile as spider silk, but gradually strengthening with each interaction. That evening, Dr. Martinez arrived for her first session, bringing with her specialized communication tools designed for deaf children experiencing trauma. She observed Emma's interactions with the dogs for nearly an hour before offering her professional assessment. "What she's created here is remarkable," the psychologist explained. "The dogs have become her voice, each expressing different aspects of what she can't verbalize. Alpha represents protection. Shadow embodies her fear. Duchess carries her pain through that injured hip." "How do we build on this?" Ryan asked, his concern evident. "I want to help her, but I feel like I'm stumbling in the dark." "Follow her lead," Dr. Martinez advised. "She's created this system because it works for her. Your job isn't to replace it, but to become part of it." As the sessions continued over subsequent days, Emma began revealing more through her drawings, detailed sketches that Dr. Martinez analyzed with increasing curiosity. "These aren't typical child drawings," she noted during a private conversation with Amanda and Ryan. "The perspective, the accuracy she's drawing memories with photographic precision." "Is that significant?" Amanda asked. "It could be." Dr. Martinez hesitated. "I'd like to try something if you're comfortable with it. There's a technique called guided memory retrieval that might help us understand what she's processing." With their permission, the psychologist began a gentle exploration through Emma's artwork during their next session, using sign language. She asked Emma about specific elements in her drawings, particularly the recurring figure of a man watching from a distance. "Who is this person?" she signed. Emma's response was immediate. She pointed to Ryan, then signed hospital and crying. Ryan's face drained of color. "That's not possible. She couldn't remember that." Dr. Martinez remained professional but couldn't hide her surprise. "Was there a time you were at the hospital when Emma might have seen you?" The room fell silent as Ryan struggled with his answer. "After the accident," he finally admitted. "I was stateside between deployments when I heard about the crash. I went to the hospital. But David was still alive then. I saw Emma through the window of her room. She was sedated, bandaged. I didn't think she could see me." "Why didn't you stay?" Amanda asked softly. "David was her legal father. I had signed away my rights. What could I offer her then?" Pain etched itself across Ryan's features. "I left flowers for Sarah with the nurses and deployed 3 days later." Dr. Martinez processed this revelation carefully. "This changes our understanding significantly. Emma not only remembers seeing you, but she's been processing that memory through her artwork. She's been trying to tell us something all along." Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, Ryan retreated to the porch, the weight of revelation heavy on his shoulders. Amanda found him there, staring into the darkness where the shepherds maintained their silent patrol. "I should have stayed," he said without turning. 8 years ago, when Sarah told me she was moving on, after the accident when I saw Emma in that hospital bed, I've spent my life running from the hard things." "We both have," Amanda admitted, settling into the chair beside him. "After your father died, I pushed you away when I should have held on tighter. After Afghanistan, I hid out here rather than facing what went wrong." Their quiet conversation was interrupted by Jessica's unexpected arrival. She emerged from her truck with a heavy cardboard box in her arms, her expression troubled. "I found this while cleaning out my storage unit," she explained once they'd settled in the kitchen. "Sarah left it with me before the accident. She made me promise to keep it safe, said it contained important papers for Emma's future." The box yielded its secrets, slowly birth certificates, insurance policies, and finally a sealed envelope addressed to Ryan in Sarah's flowing handwriting. He opened it with trembling fingers, reading silently before looking up with shock. "She was sick," he said, voice barely audible. "Terminal diagnosis, 6 months before the accident. She was planning to contact me, to tell me about Emma before—" He couldn't finish. Jessica nodded sadly. "Pancreatic cancer. She didn't want anyone to know. Wanted Emma's last memories of her to be normal. The accident happened before she could implement her plan." "There's more," Ryan continued, scanning the letter. "David knew. He was my roommate during basic training before I got shipped overseas. Sarah reached out to him after she found out she was pregnant, not knowing we were friends. He promised to look after her until I came back, but they fell in love." Amanda completed the thought. "Yes, but he never forgot it was my child he was raising. Ryan pulled out another envelope from the box. This is from David, dated the week before the accident. The letter revealed a final, crushing truth. David had been planning to contact Ryan to reunite Emma with her biological father. He'd sensed something was wrong with Sarah, suspected she was hiding her illness, and wanted to ensure Emma wouldn't be alone if anything happened to them. The accident wasn't just a tragedy, Jessica whispered. It interrupted their plans to bring you back into Emma's life. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. After 8 years of separation and misunderstanding, a series of events beyond anyone's control had brought them together anyway, a flood that carried Alpha to Amanda's door, a child who found her voice through animals, and letters that arrived too late to prevent pain, but just in time to heal old wounds. "There's one more thing," Jessica said, hesitantly. "Something I haven't told anyone." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I have stage 4 lung cancer. 6 months, maybe less, according to the doctors." Amanda reached for her hand across the table. "That's why you've been so desperate to find a stable situation for Emma." Jessica nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I didn't want her to watch another person she loves waste away. I thought a clean break would be kinder." In that moment of raw vulnerability, with truth finally laid bare, the fragile new bonds between them strengthened. They were no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance, but survivors united by a common purpose, healing themselves by healing Emma. The morning of the final custody hearing dawned with ominous gray clouds gathering over Riverbrook. Amanda stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of a blouse she hadn't worn since James's funeral. The formal attire felt like armor, necessary but restrictive. All 14 shepherds sensed the gravity of the day, maintaining unusual silence as they watched her preparations from various positions around the farmhouse. "Not all of you can come," she explained, kneeling to scratch behind Alpha's ears. "But I need you there somehow." An idea formed as she studied Alpha's tags. Carefully, she removed them from his thick fur, threading them onto a simple chain she found in her jewelry box. The metal discs settled against her collarbone, hidden beneath her blouse but present a talisman connecting her to what mattered most. Jessica arrived early, her own attire similarly formal, though visibly worn around the edges. Emma, dressed in a blue sundress that emphasized her fragility, clutched a crude drawing of Alpha in one small hand. "She wouldn't leave without it," Jessica explained. "Barely slept last night." Amanda nodded, recognizing the signs of anxiety in the child's rigid posture. "Has she been using her signs with you? Less since yesterday? It's like she's retreating again." Jessica's voice cracked. "Amanda, if they separate her from the dogs—" "One battle at a time," Amanda interrupted, unwilling to contemplate that outcome. "Dr. Martinez is meeting us at the courthouse. She's reviewed all the evidence." The 6 weeks since the temporary custody arrangement had been granted had transformed the Sullivan farm. With Ryan's savings and the community's support, they had implemented most of Victoria's required modifications. The barn had been renovated into a proper kennel facility with individual spaces for each dog. A secure fencing system now divided the property into residential and therapy zones. Amanda had completed preliminary certification for 5 of the shepherds as therapy animals, with Alpha leading the program. Most significantly, Emma had begun to flourish in the stable environment. Her drawings had evolved from trauma processing to creative expression. She used sign language consistently and had developed a rudimentary communication system with Ryan, who spent every evening studying ASL with dogged determination. The nightmares that had plagued her since the accident occurred less frequently, and when they did, Alpha's presence could calm her without waking the entire household. The Riverbrook County Courthouse seemed less imposing this time, though the stakes remained just as high. Victoria Spencer waited inside. her expression unreadable as she observed their arrival. Over the weeks, her rigid opposition had softened somewhat as she witnessed Emma's progress during her mandatory inspections. While still insistent on proper procedures, she had become less adversarial and more collaborative in her approach. "I've submitted my final assessment to Judge Franklin," she informed them as they gathered outside the courtroom. "It reflects the substantial improvements to the property and the observed benefits of the current arrangement." Amanda blinked in surprise. "Thank you, Victoria." A slight smile flickered across the county supervisor's face. "Don't thank me yet. I've also noted areas requiring ongoing supervision and additional modifications." Inside the courtroom, Judge Franklin reviewed the extensive documentation from all parties before addressing them directly. "This court has rarely seen such a thorough transformation in circumstances between hearings," she observed. "I'm particularly impressed by the community support evidenced in these statements." Pastor Williams, seated in the gallery, nodded in acknowledgement. Beside him sat Sheriff Mitchell, Dr. Martinez, and a dozen other Riverbrook residents who had contributed to the Sullivan Farms renovation. "Ms. Spencer," the judge continued, "your final recommendation is unexpected given your initial position. Would you care to elaborate?" Victoria rose, clipboard conspicuously absent for the first time. "Your Honor, while I maintain certain reservations about the unconventional nature of this arrangement, I cannot ignore the empirical evidence of Emma Harper's improvement. The Sullivan property now meets or exceeds county requirements for both residential and therapeutic animal facilities. Most importantly, the child's progress under the current guardianship arrangement has been—" She hesitated, selecting her words carefully. "Remarkable." Dr. Sir Martinez provided expert testimony on Emma's development over the past 6 weeks, presenting comparative assessments that documented significant advances in communication, emotional regulation, and trauma processing. "What we're witnessing is not merely improvement, but transformation," she explained. "Emma has developed a complex symbolic language through her interaction with the dogs, which has gradually transferred to her human relationships. She's begun initiating communication with Mr. Sullivan using a combination of formal ASL and personalized signs they've developed together." Judge Franklin turned her attention to Ryan. "Mr. Sullivan, you've completed the court-mandated parenting classes and trauma-informed care training. What have you learned that will help you in raising your daughter?" Ryan's response reflected the profound shifts that had occurred in his perspective. "I've learned that healing isn't linear, Your Honor. Some days are breakthroughs, others are setbacks. I've learned to follow Emma's lead rather than imposing my expectations. Most importantly, I've learned that while I'm her biological father, earning the title Dad is something I'll work toward for years to come." The judge nodded approvingly before addressing Jessica. "Ms. Harper, given your health situation, which I understand has been disclosed to all parties, what are your wishes regarding Emma's placement?" Jessica's voice trembled slightly as she responded. "I want to remain in Emma's life for whatever time I have left. Your Honor, the Sullivan farm has room for me to stay nearby while maintaining my independence. This arrangement would give Emma consistency while allowing me to transition out of her daily care at my own pace, rather than through another sudden loss." Throughout the proceedings, Emma sat quietly between Amanda and Ryan, focused on teaching Alpha a new hand signal beneath the table. The shepherd's patience seemed infinite as he repeatedly responded to her subtle gestures, his attention never wavering despite the formal environment. After hearing final statements from all parties, Judge Franklin rendered her decision with unexpected swiftness. Ryan would receive full legal custody of Emma, with Amanda granted extensive visitation rights formalized through a family care agreement. The Sullivan property would maintain its dual certification as a residence and animal therapy facility, subject to annual inspections rather than the monthly oversight originally mandated. Most significantly, Jessica would be granted protected visitation rights regardless of custody arrangements. This court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances that have brought this child into the care of her biological family. Judge Franklin concluded, "While unconventional, the support system that has developed around Emma Harper, soon to be Emma Sullivan, represents the kind of healing environment this court strives to create for children in crisis." As they prepared to leave the courthouse, Victoria approached with an unexpected proposal. "The county has received a grant for innovative trauma therapy programs," she explained. "I've submitted an application based on your work with Emma and the Shepherds. If approved, it would fund a pilot program for other children experiencing similar challenges." Amanda stared at her in disbelief. "You want to replicate what we're doing?" "With proper oversight and professional guidance, yes." Victoria handed her a business card. "Dr. Martinez has agreed to serve as clinical director if you're willing to develop the animal therapy component." Rain had begun to fall as they left the courthouse, but unlike the previous hearing, it felt refreshing rather than ominous. The small convoy of vehicles wound their way back to the Sullivan farm, where the Shepherds greeted their return with controlled enthusiasm, all except Alpha, who maintained his dignified reserve until Emma knelt to embrace him. The weeks that followed established new rhythms and routines. Jessica moved into the converted guest cottage on the property, her deteriorating health managed with the help of visiting nurses and the constant support of her newly expanded family. On good days, she participated in Emma's therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez. On difficult days, Emma would sit quietly beside her bed, Alpha a constant companion between them. Ryan threw himself into farm improvements with the same intensity that had characterized his military service, but the hard edges of his personality gradually softened through daily interactions with his daughter. Each evening, they practiced sign language together, developing a private vocabulary that blended standard ASL with their own invented gestures, a unique father-daughter language that bridged the silence between them. Amanda found unexpected purpose in developing the county therapy program alongside Victoria, who revealed during one planning session that her own nephew had benefited from animal therapy after a traumatic brain injury. Their former antagonism evolved into grudging respect and eventually genuine collaboration as they worked to extend the benefits Emma had experienced to other traumatized children. The first official dog therapy session for a child other than Emma took place on a brilliant October morning. 10-year-old Michael, who hadn't spoken since witnessing domestic violence in his home 6 months earlier, arrived clinging to his foster mother's hand, eyes downcast and shoulders hunched against expected disappointment. Emma, now confidently navigating her role as therapy assistant, led Michael to meet Alpha first, demonstrating without words how to approach the dignified shepherd. The boy's initial hesitation dissolved when Alpha performed the same submissive approach he had first shown Emma belly to the ground, inching forward with gentle intention. From the observation area, Amanda watched with Victoria and Dr. Martinez as a flicker of interest crossed Michael's face, the same precious spark she had witnessed in Emma months earlier. "It's working," Victoria whispered, professional detachment momentarily forgotten. "It's just beginning," Amanda corrected gently. "The dogs open the door. The healing comes after." By December, Jessica's condition had deteriorated significantly. Hospice care was established in the cottage, with the family taking shifts to ensure she was never alone. Emma, with wisdom beyond her years, seemed to understand the situation intuitively. She spent hours at her great-aunt's bedside, sometimes drawing quietly, sometimes signing stories about her day, occasionally bringing one of the smaller shepherds to visit. On a snow-dusted morning just before Christmas, Jessica slipped away peacefully with Emma asleep in a chair beside her bed. Alpha, maintaining his vigilant watch from the floor between them. The funeral was small but deeply felt, with Emma participating in her own way by releasing a white balloon carrying one of her drawings, a portrait of Jessica surrounded by protective shepherds. That evening, as the family gathered on the porch despite the cold, something remarkable happened. Emma, who had remained characteristically silent throughout the day, suddenly tugged at Ryan's sleeve. When he knelt beside her, she placed her small hands on his cheeks, focused intently on his lips, and shaped her mouth deliberately. "Dad," she vocalized, the sound rough and unpracticed but unmistakable. Ryan froze, tears filling his eyes as Amanda gasped from nearby. Emma repeated the effort, watching their reactions carefully. "Dad," she said again, this time with slightly more confidence. It was her first spoken word since the accident, a gift of immeasurable value on their darkest day. Ryan gathered her into his arms, unable to speak, as Amanda moved to embrace them both. The 3 generations of Sullivans connected in a moment of profound joy amidst grief. Spring brought new beginnings to the Sullivan farm. The county therapy program had expanded to serve 8 children regularly. With Amanda officially certified as a therapeutic animal specialist, Ryan had found purpose working with a veterans organization that provided service dogs to soldiers with PTSD, bringing his military experience full circle in healing rather than combat. Emma, now 6 and beginning to thrive in a specialized education program that incorporated her canine therapy, had developed a small vocabulary of spoken words to complement her sophisticated signing. She remained most animated and expressive with the dogs, but bridges to the human world strengthened daily through patient, consistent connection. On the anniversary of the day Martha had first brought Emma to the farm, they gathered on the hillside where the shepherds now performed their concerts regularly for visitors. The 14 German shepherds, arranged in their ceremonial semicircle, watched attentively as Emma took her position before them. When she raised her hands, the transformation remained as magical as the first time, 14 throats producing synchronized sounds that seemed almost musical in their harmony. Visitors often wept witnessing the performance, moved not just by the unusual spectacle, but by the story they now knew accompanied it, a story of loss transformed into connection, of trauma giving way to healing, of strangers becoming family. As the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, casting golden light across the Oregon landscape, Amanda stood with Ryan watching Emma conduct her canine orchestra. Alpha led the unusual chorus with dignified precision, his scar catching the fading light like a badge of honor. "I never thought we'd be here," Ryan said quietly. "A year ago, I was in a desert halfway around the world, convinced I'd never have a family." "Life brings us where we need to be," Amanda replied, "even when the path seems impossible." Emma concluded the performance with a new gesture they hadn't seen before, bringing her hands together over her heart before extending them outward toward her audience. The shepherds responded by moving from their formation to gather around her in a protective circle, Alpha pressing against her side as she turned to beam at her father and grandmother. In that moment, watching the little girl who had arrived mute and broken now radiating joy amidst her beloved dogs, Amanda understood the true meaning of redemption. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending wounds had never existed. It was about finding purpose in pain, connection through shared healing, and family in the most unexpected circumstances. As twilight deepened into dusk, 14 German shepherds led one small girl down the hillside toward home, each step a testament to resilience and the unfathomable ways that broken pieces, whether human or canine, could come together to create something whole, something beautiful, something that had never existed before. As the years gather like autumn leaves, we understand what truly matters isn't perfection but connection. Amanda and Ryan's story reminds us it's never too late to mend what's broken between parent and child. Those 8 years of silence, how familiar that feels to many of us holding on to grievances that once seemed insurmountable. We recognize ourselves in Amanda's stubborn pride and Ryan's inability to reach across the divide. Emma and her shepherds show us that healing rarely follows the path we expect. Like those 14 rescued dogs, each carrying visible and invisible wounds, we too bear scars from life's hardships. Yet, these imperfections don't diminish our capacity to love and protect what matters most. When Emma conducts her canine orchestra, she demonstrates that communication transcends words, much like how understanding can bridge the gaps between generations in our own families. Perhaps you're estranged from a son or daughter. Perhaps there are grandchildren you barely know. This story whispers a powerful truth: it's never too late to begin again. Even in life's winter season, new growth remains possible if we're brave enough to reach out, humble enough to apologize, and wise enough to recognize that family, in whatever form it takes, remains our most precious gift.